Welcome back to War Thunder and welcome aboard the Panther II and later on the Horton. So you can name this video the Panther and its hoe. We'll have to see how it works out. So this is one of the many versions of Napalmratte. I hope I pronounced it right. If not, so be it. And I am going in very aggressively. Now I put a few bushes on my Panther II. I try to experiment a little bit around with it, see what it helps. It helps absolutely nothing. That's just a short summary of my experiences so far, except if you are in a T95 together with the buffed cupola in terms of the shells over penetrating, not an armor buff, but a mechanical buff, so to speak, so the shells don't ricochet inwards anymore, despite having penetrated. The Panther doesn't have this luxury of massive frontal armor. It has more than the RE251, of which you will see two in the background right now, and I'm not quite sure what those two guys are planning. In comparison to the RE251, the Panther II has a bit more survivability and a bit more armor, but does not really sacrifice top speed or mobility, but a bit maneuverability. We have to give it to the RE251 that it's more maneuverable. And also the firepower is different. The RE251 relies on a, in most cases, rather useless HESH shell and a 320mm penetrating heat defense shell that can deal with practically everything, even in an up tier. The Panther II relies on the good old 88, the long 88 with the fantastic APHE shell. It's not so fantastic on, for example, the Tiger II, because the Tiger II has to deal with opponents from the front. The Panther can sometimes do that as well, but with tanks like the T29 and the IS-6, for example, you want to have the side shots. And the Panther obviously then trades off mobility, maneuverability compared to armor. And the armor on the Tiger II, well, it gets power creep, let's put it that way. The one thing that I think a tank should always have is it should be immune to AAA from the front. And I ambushed here this M46. You can see where I'm on the minimap. I'm inside the enemy's half of the map, so to speak, and I had no idea where this shot was coming from, and I was a bit curious. Where did this shot come from? For a split second I saw a glimpse of a tank. It was super Pershing and a snapshot, and that kills him. To make it very short, I think the super Pershing is the actual victim of the 6.7 situation. The tank was not stronger than the King Tiger when it came out at 6.7. It also, how to say it, there were not enough British driving around with HESH that you could make use of your special double-spaced armor. And the gun, well, you had 10 degrees of gun depression, however, you didn't have the reload of the long 88 and the pen. So then afterwards also the T29 and the American T34 came out, and they left the Super Pershing in the dust. So nobody ever talks about the Super Pershing being the actual American victim of the power creep, or, you know, the new implementation of certain premiums. For example, the Super Pershing has the same reload for the 90mm as the T29 has for the 105, and it has more penetration and more high explosive filler on the T29. So much for fairness and balance. And it's a tech tree version. Yeah, and it can't survive the shells. But back to the Panther II. So I have now 3 kills, and I am looking here for an opportunity. I see an M41 Walker Bulldog, and to compare the Panther II, for example, to the Vickers MBT, the Centurion Mark 10, you don't have a stabilizer, you don't have an insanely fast reload, and you take always gun breach damage, you always take turret ring damage, and it's always your gunner that dies. Always. Exclusively. Without any exception. And then the repair times, you don't have those 5-second repair times for the gun breach and the turret ring like a T29. And yet the Panther II manages to get in better results than for example the 10.5 centimeter Tiger, which was or is still my most played tank in arcade. And realistic, not so much. Especially with the recent additions. So it's been a while since I played it excessively in arcade, and yeah, I can't really say what it is, but it feels so obsolete. It feels so power creep, and the gun, even though it has better penetration and better high explosive filling stats than the T29's APHE, or hell, even the Russian 122mm APHE, doesn't help you against an IS-6. To make matters worse, even the Jagdtiger's 128mm gun can't guarantee you a hit on the, or a killing blow on the front of an IS-6. So you kind of see where Germany has really the struggle. They have good APHE shells in comparison to other nations' APHE shells in terms of reload and high explosive filling and overall performance. But then again, other nations can rely on thicker armor. They can rely on stabilizers, APDS, heat FS, you name it. Excluding here, okay, that was pretty stupid by me. I looked the wrong direction, and this T29 was lying in ambush. So overall, you could rant all day long about the situation with German tanks. It's just not fair. And then most of the time, Germany, well, fights alone or with the Japanese together against the other three nations in a perfect combo. So it's like arcade, except that you take the worst parts of realistic into that battle for the matchmaker in comparison. And then you go to 7.0 and suddenly you have mobile armor. The RE251 is a nice tank, don't get me wrong. However, it's behind a paywall. It can't save Germany, except if you go for a pay-to-win aspect for Germany, Everybody has an RE251 within its lineup to, make a difference on the battlefield, to crack open other premiums such as the IS-6, and I will never let this criticism go. Even with CAS, with German CAS in particular, you still have a damn hard time to make it work against an IS-6. You don't have too many rockets, it's not guaranteed that you one-shot them, and then cannon CAS, well, you have to come directly from above. The Horton can do it, but again it's 7.0. You need multiple hits, you have to train it, and you have to have the Horton. And there I damaged the gun breach of the T29, so that was quite something. And then I joined the dogfight, and this is really the strength of the Horton. And let me just tell you two things about the Panther II and the Horton that annoy me so much when it comes to purely tank RB. Just tank RB. They are effective vehicles for the Germans. And then when it was like that, back in the days when there was not that much power creep and Germany still had a strong 6.7 lineup, and we didn't have the nerfed King Tiger in terms of survivability, people really complained so damn hard about the Panther II and the Horton 229. What then followed was a consecutive nonsense at the hands of Gaijin, let's put it that way, in my opinion. The Panther got up to 7.0, and yes, it can hold itself, but it hurt Germany. That left a gap in the tech tree, so to speak, and Gaijin filled that with a premium light tank with a heat FS shell. Again, kind of a power creep, kind of, making it work behind a paywall, in my opinion. That's a very negative way of saying it. And do you remember what happened to the Horton when it was bumped up to 8.0? 8.0 in chat RP, where it gets exclusively matched against 9.0s? With that acceleration against MiG-17s and Sabres and Hunters? Yeah. But then the outcry from the German community was too much. And I swear by everything that I know that the MK103's accuracy got nerfed. I remember them being a bit more accurate like a few years ago. 2 years ago, something like that. Could be wrong, could be my crews. They're just a fully upgraded expert crew, just saying. And it's also the same with the B6R3, the ME 410. And yet you can manage to make it work. And watch this situation. I nearly had the P51 in my line. Just a few more moments of turning and I would have been behind him. You can see the Horton at lower tiers, at lower speeds, is a bit sluggish, but it's okay. And I got a hit into him. Now I think I would have him, but one of my teammates got a double strike, literally. Oh man. Yeah, and that's practically it for this battle. I also wanted to experiment a bit around with the Do 217s. With, it's not in this battle, in this particular battle, but with the next patch, rockets will be, brought back into reasonable damage lines. Actual game mechanics. And so, the Do 217, which also was like a part of criticism because it was a fast bomber that could drop big payload with the bomb aiming reticle, and guess what? The bomb aiming reticle got removed. Now, granted, this bomber is not the only one that can do that. For example, the British with their Hamptons, which also the Russians have a premium version one. I guess battle rating 1.7 with 4 1,000-pound bombs that it can drop separately. So we saw a lot of changes within War Thunder. Some were good, some were bad, some were counterproductive, some were controversial. Doesn't matter. We have to deal with what we have in the game right now, and that might be a personal big problem of mine, that I sometimes refuse to adapt. However, sometimes it felt to me like it was less about tanks in tank RP as rather to who has the better CAS, who wins the spawn point battle. So here we have 2 air targets, 6 ground targets, and a lot of hits and impact on the gameplay. You can see I'm currently respading a Panther II, which is actually fun at the moment. And I think this was one of the first times that I used the Horton in tank RP a bit more excessively. So that's it for me today. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening. Please give this video a like if you did, subscribe if you want to see more. Let me know in the comment section what you think about the current situation and the Panther II and the Horton in particular. And as usual, we'll see each other on the battlefields and in the skies of War Thunder.